think the reason that the film is so intimate and personal is because actually predominantly the person following me a lot of the time was my husband. um, he in 2017 when I became the leader of the Labour Party, he just picked up his phone one day and started filming, and uh, we didn't talk about why or what would happen with that. I think we both knew that we were on a journey that we didn't know where it would lead, and it felt important to capture. So as much as you can see in the film that I was relatively reluctant some of the time, I'm glad that he did. And then after I left office, then the conversation came. You can see beside me a New Zealand team, a US team, the New Zealand team, who of course, were there throughout the time that I was Prime Minister, being New Zealand based. They saw the story unfolding as well. And it really was through them after I left office that this story turned into something that could be shared with the public.
I would say authenticity, warmth, a sense of humor, compassion. Um, I think the things that people crave in their leaders and want to see more of. I watched Jacinda during COVID, during her COVID briefings, which would air on CNN or MSNBC, and it was really a breath of fresh air to see somebody who was making policy decisions based on science and common sense and compassion. And I was really taken with her style of leadership and admired her from afar for many years. So when this project came my way and I was welcomed into this group of New Zealanders and made a part of this project, it was a real privilege. And I felt the tremendous responsibility of, helping to build out the team and craft this story in a way that did justice to her experience. And I hope it did justice to her experience.
One of the issues is that this is a New Zealand story, but it's also a global story. And I think in seeing it on screen, I hope we can recognize that a lot of the challenges that are faced globally, we are genuinely felt by many, not just by singular countries. And in the face of that, I hope that people also see that kindness, empathy, different leadership traits, they don't just have to belong to New Zealand either. New Zealand is a very special country, and I think I feel blessed to have been in politics there because I never felt like I couldn't be myself or that I couldn't talk openly about kindness and empathy. And that was a real blessing that I credit New Zealand for. But I do not believe that these are traits that only belong to us. The same challenges that you see in New Zealand, you see globally, those same leadership traits, I believe we can see globally too.
I think one thing to note is that it's not like we had a slew of leaders that were like Jacinda. When she showed up in 2017, it was incredibly refreshing for us. As a female leader myself, I was blown away that she could turn up unapologetically with female traits and completely own it. So she put her values of kindness and empathy before everything else. That's what guided her, and that felt just so liberating for us as other female leaders. Like, oh, we don't have to fill up gaps that we thought we had because we're not men. We can just lead with the traits that are probably more naturally female. So you asked about political leadership. I think the traits that Jacinda displayed at that time are needed in every kind of leadership. We need those voices that from young leaders that may not necessarily think that they're suited to a leadership role because they don't look like that alpha style that we grew up with.
I'm always very wary that I'm an observer. And I think it's very hard for an observer to truly understand the full history and culture of another nation. But what I can say is I came into New Zealand Parliament 15 years ago, more than 15 years ago. I was the 99th woman to have ever been in Parliament, the 99th. Not many when you think about our history of democracy and that we were the first country in the world where women had the right to vote. And yet when I left, 50% of our parliament were women. Things can change very, very quickly. But but I think in order for them to change, we have to maintain the expectation that they will. I'll just actually, I think, probably reflect the facts, and that is that a bill was put forward that, as you described, was seen as a backward move on the question of Indigenous rights in New Zealand. And what followed was the largest protest New Zealand has seen in its history. So I think that probably says it all.
I mean, our hope is that a whole lot of young leaders see this film and maybe see themselves in Jacinda, or there's somewhere that there's a reflection of the story that feels personal to them and empowers them to do something good. Beyond that, we don't know.
Well, we did try to craft the film in a way that a global audience could follow along. So you didn't need to understand all the ins and outs of New Zealand politics in order to follow this story. We built just enough of that historical context around Jacinda so that the juxtaposition to her private life was, you could follow it. You could follow the story. And our hope is that this is a film that will reach audiences worldwide.
One of the things that for us, I think, looking at, and today when we were sitting in that theatre and we could look at it objectively, was this is really a once-in-a-lifetime film where a world leader opens up their life, literally their bedroom when they're trying to solve problems. No, with folders on the bed. But, opens up to a level that's so vulnerable and so sincere that I think it will resonate beyond New Zealand, beyond politics. To an audience that's deeply curious about what does it take to lead a country, especially through a crisis like Jacinda led us through many. So.
You've acknowledged that what we're seeing in politics is there is a particular style at the moment that we see in many corners of the globe. But I think it would be wrong to assume that elevation of that style means that people no longer seek compassion, or that they no longer seek empathy or kindness. I think we have to dig deeper to understand what's happening in different parts of the world and the fear that exists. I think, unfortunately, in politics, and this has long been the case, one of the easiest responses to fear and change is often blame and to build on that sense of fear. The harder response is to acknowledge where people are and to look for solutions and to make sure that in the process you don't other people. And so I would say we need to look beyond individual leaders as we seek that different style and to answer ultimately the question that voters are asking of us. Now, I'm not saying that the leadership style that I have was, or me as a leader, that I was perfect. I absolutely was not. I made mistakes. But I hope people can see in this story that I was human, and that actually traits of kindness and empathy are also successful traits in leadership and politics, and that hopefully more people will emulate them. I think the question we have to ask ourselves is, of all the things that a young person could choose to do in this world, what are we doing to make sure that politics, or being a public servant, is attracting the best and the brightest and those who want to give of themselves? And it's fair to say at the moment, probably that career isn't putting its best foot forward. It probably seems like a really difficult place to be. My message would be, my time in politics was the privilege of a lifetime. And as hard and as difficult as it was, I would not change having had that opportunity. And I would encourage anyone to take up those opportunities and to take up public service and to look to politics as a place where you can do good. And we have to keep encouraging young people to take up that, because otherwise we won't see that diversity of view, and we won't see those who seek public service for true service.
I mean, as Jacinda said, we're seeing global trends towards this style of leadership, and unless we offer an alternative version, it's going to be hard to imagine what it would feel like to have a different kind of leadership. So my hope is that this film offers that portrait, that view of what it looks like to, approach leadership with kindness and empathy, and And lastly, I would say that it is really hard to be optimistic right now because we are up against so many challenges, from climate change to war to, um, the sort of othering that Jacinda mentioned of each other. And it feels like we've lost this sense of humanity. And I would hope that people can dig deep and try to find that sense of optimism that we talk about in the film, that Jacinda talks about. And it's hard. It's sometimes very hard to dig in and find that. But when you're in those tough moments, that's when you need to tell yourself, I can do this. One foot in front of the next, we can do this. And so I hope that the film offers that hope.